How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. For those of you that are new, welcome to FP Elijah. My name is Elijah, and what we do here is chat all things FPL. Today's video is part 2 in a 3-part series leading up to Gameweek 1, where we will discuss how to pick a Gameweek 1 team as well as my general strategy. So sit back, I hope you got your popcorn ready, and just enjoy. Just a quick recap. In part 1 of the series, we went through a complete beginner's guide to FPL, discussing everything from your initial team selection, transfers, chips, a complete points breakdown, as well as my advice. So if you're new to FPL, I really suggest that you watch that first video. I've put a link to that video in the description below. In part 3 will be my final team selection for Gameweek 1, as well as me helping you out with your team selections by going through my favorite players at all the different price brackets. With that being said, let's get straight into today's video. Today's video is split into 4 topics, starting with how to pick a Gameweek 1 team, as well as my general strategy, broken down into transfers, captaincy, and chips. These 4 topics form the basis to how I generally play FPL. Kicking off with your Gameweek 1 team selection. My advice summarized in one word is flexibility. Flexibility is so important in your squads. It will allow you to make transfers easily without having to rip up your entire team to get in a player that you want based either on form or fixture. Therefore, targeting various priced players in different positions is extremely vital for your Gameweek 1 team. This season, like every season before this, I will spend a maximum of 9.5 million on my keeper pairing. I personally believe that the majority of your cash should be spent on the outfield players, as there is massive value in a 4.5 million keeper from a defensively minded team. Your second keeper, then valued at 4 million, should either be one that has a small chance of starting, like Ben Foster, or it should be the keeper from the same team as your number 1 keeper in the event of injury or COVID. Another strategy would be to have a non-playing keeper as well as one premium keeper such as Emi Martinez. The guy has the highest ownership of any goalkeeper in the game and his price is completely justified. Emi Martinez has great fixtures and let's be honest, the guy is a beast. He's fixture proof and someone that you can always have in your team regardless of who he faces. So that's another strategy to look into, but one that I personally would not go for. A third option would be to have 2 rotating keepers that are cheap but offer amazing value like the 2 on screen now. But like I said, for me, this keeper pairing is just 0.5 million too expensive. In defense, in my opinion, you just have to have Trent in your team, especially now with Robertson out injured. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are aware that the FPL gods have sent down an absolute angel named Kostas Tsimikas, who is a £4 million option that may be starting in an attacking Liverpool team. Now, I'm still a bit wary about this, as there's every chance that Jurgen Klopp takes him off early during games, or that James Milner could just play as left back. But also remember, this is temporary, as Robertson will be back quite soon, possibly in Gameweek 4. So if you do go for Tsimikas, it should be with Trent and not in place of Trent. Once you have Trent in your team, I would then suggest one of 2 options. Either you go with 2 £5.5 million defenders, such as Luke Shaw, Luca Digne or Cresswell, or you go with one of them plus 2 rotating £4.5 million defenders. Now, the best defenders that I like in that price range would be Ben White from Arsenal, Webster or Feldman from Brighton, or Luke Ayling from Leeds. With this strategy, that means playing 3 at the back, which is how I generally play. I avoid 4 at the back and would rather have an additional attacker, but this season, 4 at the back has a lot of potential and value, allowing for a more balanced squad, and it's something that I will think about for my final team selection. When it comes to the midfield, I'd say you'd either have to have one or if not both of Salah and Bruno heading into Gameweek 1. Now I know there's loads of money tied up in these 2 players, but at their price bracket, it'll allow you to drop down to literally any other midfielder in the game in one simple transfer, and then you can spread the money elsewhere if needed. If you save a transfer in Gameweek 2, with the likes of Lukaku joining Chelsea, as well as Harry Kane getting back to form, you could switch one of these premium midfielders to one of the premium strikers come Gameweek 3 using your 2 free transfers without having to take a hit. And when it comes to your forwards, I would suggest going with 2 mid-premium strikers. Either 2 of Danny Ings, Calvert-Lewin, Antonio, maybe Callum Wilson, or if you want to drop down a level to save a bit more cash, you could go with Ivan Toney. After finding your perfect 11, you then have to think about your bench. Some managers prefer having a full squad, but I personally would suggest having a maximum of 2 playing options that are relatively cheap. For me and my team, I will most probably go with 1 playing option, as I like to spend the majority of my money on my starting 11. That essentially sums up how I would go about picking a Gameweek 1 team. And now we can move on to my general strategy, starting with the transfer strategy. When it comes to transfers, I base all my transfers on the eye test. A player does not have to score 15 points for me to notice him. I try my best to watch every game, and if the player seems to be getting into good positions and was unfortunate not to get an attacking return, they instantly become someone I target based on the upcoming fixture list. I don't look too much into detailed stats such as expected goals or assists or bookies odds for clean sheets or goal scored, etc. The eye test for me is absolutely everything. And point 2 when it comes to my transfers is that I'm never ever afraid to take a hit. If my gut is telling me that a certain player will bang, and in my head I feel certain of it, I more often than not go for him. Hits do work, trust me, they do. For instance, last season, and even seasons prior to this, I would take a -8 in a single game week because I had a gut feeling that ended up in a net points of say 10 or 15. But hits can also massively backfire, where I took out a player that actually scored and brought in a player that blanked, and it was done for a hit. This happened quite often to me, and it's something that I need to try and limit. So do take a hit, but try not to take a hit every single game week. Limit yourself, but also don't be too cautious. And the last point when it comes to my transfer strategy is that you should go for the odd differential. Crazy thing, but when a random player scores a hat-trick, I've more often than not owned that player. Jota for Wolves, Deulofeu for Watford, Martial for Man United, and even Gareth Bale last season. This season, however, I need to limit this. Last season, I went for the likes of Foden, for instance, for game week punts that ended in absolute tears. So be wary of being too punty at times. My suggestion would be is to have 2 or 3 differentials in your Game Week 1 team. If you don't know what a differential is, it's basically a player with very low ownership in FPL. Some regard the ownership being under 5%, some may say it's under 10, but for me, a good differential is a player with under 15% ownership. To summarize the transfer strategy, we have to speak about one more thing, which is fixture versus form. A lot of FPL managers often go with your form players, but for me and my teams and how I've played in the past is that I base my transfers on 60% fixture and 40% form. Captaincy. Captaincy is the one single thing in FPL that can make or break your game week. A good captaincy can make you go from a decent game week to one that's absolutely amazing, or one that was absolutely horrible to a game week that was quite decent. And in the past, the captaincy has been the one thing that's let me down, as I usually go with who I think will potentially be the top point scorer of the game week instead of who I feel will definitely get an attacking return. This season, I'm going to try and target the consistent players like your Mo Salah, Harry Kane, Son Heung-min, Bruno Fernandes, as well as Kevin De Bruyne and so on, instead of the one game week punts like I usually do season in and season out. And lastly, when it comes to captaincy, I never ever captain a defender. No, not even Trent. The possibility of a defender blanking compared to that of a midfielder or a forward is just far more likely, and not for me personally. And finally, you can't speak about a strategy without speaking about your chip strategy. Remember, there are 4 chips in the game, which are your wildcard, triple captain, bench boost, and free hit. Your wildcard, you get 2 available for the season, the first of which expires in Game Week 20. So if you don't use your first wildcard by the Game Week 20 deadline, you will have lost that wildcard. Your triple captain, bench boost, and free hit, you only get to use once per season. So with all these chips in the game, when's the best time to actually use them? Well, there's no set time to use each of these chips, and it all depends on your team and your strategy, or how well you got off to the start of the season. For the first wildcard, I generally have used it in my first 4 seasons between game weeks 2 to 4, playing aggressive at the start of the season. I usually hit the wildcard quite early so that I could cash those price rises and target teams and players that are in form, as well as fixture swings. Last season was quite different for me, as I got off to quite an amazing start in FPL. So I didn't go aggressive or semi-aggressive. I actually held on to the wildcard until I was basically forced to use it on that expiration date. This season, however, there's a massive fixture swing around Game Week 7 for a lot of teams. So if you want to be semi-aggressive, I'd say that's about the right time to play the first wildcard. The triple captain. I always use this chip during a double game week for the maximum chance of an attacking return. Now, if you don't know what double game week is, it's basically a game week where a team or 2 or many play more than 1 game in a given week. You also get blank game weeks, where a team or 2 or more yet again won't even feature in that game week. Now, a double game week and a blank game week is basically caused due to either COVID, where fixtures were postponed, or when a few Premier League teams reach the latter stages of the FA Cup and other competitions, and the fixtures basically clash. With that, you get a double game week and a blank game week. So quite often, people keep their chips in hand, waiting for these types of moments to pounce. And for me, the best time to use your triple captain chip is in a double game week. But more often than not, some people play their triple captain chip on a player in a single game week, like last season in Game Week 1 in Mo Salah when he scored a hat-trick. And that was actually such a good decision, but I never ever have the balls to do so. I more often than not have a gut feeling, at least twice a season, that a certain player will score a hat-trick during a single game week, and have been correct, but I just couldn't get myself to do it. Will I change this season? I highly doubt that. As I said before, you then get a second wildcard to use. I use this wildcard before a massive double game week that's inevitable at the end of the season, which is most likely around the Game Week 34 to Game Week 37. But remember, this is team dependent. If your team has a lot of injuries, or you're falling behind and you just don't seem to be catching the right players, using the wildcard early can be very beneficial for your team. To maximize on the bench boost, I use it the immediate game week after using my second wildcard, so that I can ensure that instead of having a strong starting 11, I have a fairly decent starting 15, ensuring that I get good points from all 15 players. And lastly, the free hit chip. The free hit chip is essentially a wildcard for 1 game week only, where the week after you used your free hit, your team will go back to the team you had prior to using that chip. For me, the free hit is most suited for a blank game week in the season, or even a double game week. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below or on Twitter or Instagram at FPLijah. Like the video, subscribe, share it with your mates, and in part 3, we will go through my Gameweek 1 team selection as well as me helping you out with your team selections. Anyway, cheers guys, and FPL responsibly.